Well, hello and welcome to Kitchen Table Conversations with the Men and Masculine Folks Network, a program of men as peacemakers, where together we are shaping new meanings of masculinity. These conversations help us see the inherent dignity of those around us. We help together practice collective care and responsibility, and we're learning how to do it in a way that acknowledges that all of us are whole human beings. So, my name is Sean Hayes. He, him, his are my pronouns, and I'm excited to get into it today with my friends here and our special guest star, as well as all of you who are going to be tuning in. So, as a reminder, each month we choose a topic that can help men and masculine folks identify our own roles within community to create thriving and safe spaces within communities. We host two different discussions during the month where we focus on this single topic, where the first conversation is really about developing a deeper understanding of this topic or the issue at hand. And then during the second conversation of the month, this one, we talk about practical, tangible ways that men and masculine people can work alongside others in community to create that change that we want to see. So remember, these conversations are a way for us to come together to learn new things from different perspectives, as well as demonstrate how we can all have these important conversations together with the people in our own lives at our own kitchen tables. So again, we're glad you're joining us and tuning in, whether you're watching this conversation live on Facebook or YouTube, or if you're tuning in at a later time. And again, we're just grateful you're here and connecting with us.
And as you may already know, this month we have been talking about trafficking and commercial sexual exploitation. And today's conversation will be focusing on the tangible, practical ways men and masculine folks can address trafficking in our communities. And today, we're so excited and grateful to welcome our guest star, Estefany Lazaro, to our kitchen table conversation. Stefany is a safe harbor specialist at Esperanza United, based in the Twin Cities, and we can't wait to hear more about this topic and from her expertise. Before we get into our conversation today, let's take a minute for each of us and our friends here to introduce themselves. And I'll start myself. My name is Felix Martinez, and my pronouns are he, him, and his, or él in Spanish. And I'm coming from Eagan, Minnesota. And I work at Esperanza United as the Engaged Men and Boys specialist.
Hi there, everyone. My name is Hunter Beckstrom. I use he, him, and his pronouns, and I'm coming to y'all from Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I work at the Minnesota Coalition Against Sexual Assault, or MINCASA, as one of our prevention program coordinators, and really excited for this conversation today.
And again, my name is Sean Hayes, and my pronouns are he, him, and his, and I am coming from Duluth, Minnesota, to all of you today. I work at Men as Peacemakers with the Men and Masculine Folks Network, as well as our Don't Buy It project.
And now, our time to present our guest star. Stefany, please tell us your name, your pronouns, and share briefly about how you get involved with this kind of work that you do.
Thank you, everyone, for inviting me, and it's an honor to be here. I'm a little nervous, but I'm really excited to be here and have this conversation. So my name is Estefany. My pronouns are she, her, ella. I'm right now located in Farmington, but our offices are in St. Paul. So I work with Esperanza United. As Felix shared, I'm the safe harbor specialist and also a family advocate. So how I got involved to this work. So I started school. I didn't know what I wanted to do. During school, I just started taking a couple classes, got my attention. I ended up doing my internship at Esperanza United, formerly Casa Esperanza, where I really enjoyed the work that and their mission that they do. From after finishing my internship during the summer, I I transitioned to what's relief, which is a part-time working at the shelter, supporting the family during the crisis calls. From there, I transitioned to becoming a full-time family advocate, where I served families, women and men, that were experiencing any form of domestic violence, that didn't need any shelter space but needed ongoing services such as like support with orders for protection, just explaining them the process of like what court criminal case might look like, referring them to therapy, just providing the necessary resources based on each individual's needs and their families. Started doing the work in the 7-county metro area. From there, an opportunity opened within Esperanza United to work with youth under the age of 24 who and this year is our second year that we actually received the grant from Safe Harbor from MDH. So I'm now a full-time. So like I mentioned, I now work full-time and work with youth under the age of 24 and continue providing. So I'm part of 2 teams now. So I used to be part of the intervention team. I'm now part of the prevention and intervention team, where I now support Felix, Beverly, doing support groups at different schools, doing presentations on these topics such as teen dating violence. Felix does a healthy masculinity, and I do the human trafficking. And we actually just got training on the Not a Number training curriculum. So the plan is to be doing the groups using the Not a Number curriculum with youth. And I also, so that's a little bit of the prevention side work that I do. With the intervention, I still do direct services with survivors, and again, doing the orders for protection, support with police reports, explaining the rights, and going to court with them if it's necessary. And we also I do an assessment with each family or youth, and we also support with like housing, so funds for housing and anything that's gonna help them continue like education, or just again based on different needs of each one. We just I continue supporting them.
Well, that is a whole lot, and we are so glad that you're able to be here with us today, Stefany. And so, as we mentioned before, last time during our conversation, we were joined by Noelle Volin, who's the We Are All Connected director at Menace Peacemakers, and she kind of educated us and talked to us about what trafficking and exploitation look like. We talked a lot about the nuance of how this stuff shows up differently within our different communities. And again, today we'll be focusing more on those tangible, like practical steps that men and masculine folks can take to address trafficking and exploitation in our own communities. And so one of the purposes of the Men and Masculine Folks Network is to help men and masc folks understand that we actually do have an important role to play in preventing violence and harm, and also then in helping to create safe and thriving communities. We know that everyone has influence in some way, and that men and masc folks are able to use our influence and our gifts and skills to change community conditions. So let's get into some of these practical steps. And one of the first questions we have for Stefany to start off this conversation is, can you share with us a story of a time that a man made a positive impact in your life or work?
Okay, so I'm gonna give a trigger warning. I'm not gonna disclose this who the man in my life is. It's it made an impact in my life because of the work that I do and why I continue doing the work that I do. But so someone really close and that I know had shared a time where they were, back when they were a teenager, they disclosed that they lost their virginity to someone where an adult had paid this female to have sex with him, to be able to teach him. At this time, he was 14, 15 years old. So it was something that was like celebrated, something of like, you need to know before you meet the person that you're going to be with. So after a long discussion and talking about it, and having this conversation with him, and also me sharing a little bit of the type of the work that I do, and I being able to identify like those red flags and unhealthy relationships he had with these other older adults, he realized that he was a victim of rape. And I think it took him many years to realize that he was a victim of rape and didn't see it like that, because it was so normalized to be dating like older women, or it was okay to be paying for someone to have sex with them. So yeah, we talked a little bit about this, and I think how it made a positive impact, it's because it has allowed me to, well, I thank him for sharing the story as well and trusting me with this. And I did ask him for permission. But just the fact that this has, to break those, how would you say it? Like break those patterns of normalizing certain behaviors, and having conversations now with youth that are close around us, or that we work with, or friends, and have conversations about how a male can also be victim of sexual assault, and as well of the importance of consent, and just having these conversations around what human trafficking looks like nowadays in the modern days. And we also, and I can talk about this maybe in the next question, but just kind of about like the age gap in dating, and a lot of things that probably in our culture growing up we saw, and I continue to see when working with youth, of how newcomer youth that I have worked with, it's so normalized to be dating older men, or vice versa, or women dating older men. So this is a little bit of what has made an impact into the work that I do and in my life. And again, I think it's also really important to have conversations with them, that men also can be a victim. And sometimes, like growing up, it's the machismo, right, in our culture of how can a guy be raped? Guys don't get raped, or guys cannot. They're supposed to be strong, and so it's allowing them to give that space. And I think this is why he made a big impact for being able to share this part of his life during the space. Mm-hmm.
And thanks so much for sharing that, and knowing that he made an impact on you, but I'm sure you certainly most certainly made an impact on him as well as Stefany. And I think you looked at so many really amazing points, and it makes me think of, like you were talking about before, that especially attached to masculinity, like I'm sure that was seen like as a rite of passage into like manhood, for example, something along those lines, or like it's seen as for a young man or a masculine person, it's sought after to have like an older, if we're looking through a heteronormative lens, like an older female or woman to be able to doing those types of things. But I think you had specifically talked about consent within that space. And I think talking about this in relation to trafficking, I think there's such like an illusion of choice that people have that are experiencing trafficking and or exploitation. And I think that's where we really have to build empathy, because so many folks might just say like, why don't you just leave, or why don't you just stop doing sex work? But maybe that's the only quote unquote choice that someone has to be able to pay for their bills, or like take care of their children, or it's easier to like have their children watched by the next door neighbor rather than having someone to be like a certified nanny or whatever that kind of role might be. And so I think, one of the pieces that we really have to work on is building this type of empathy and kind of breaking down this illusion of choice, because I don't think, and this is totally up to interpretations, but I think if folks really felt like they had a choice, circumstances might be different for individuals if they had the means, like the financial means, the connections, safe and affordable housing to be able to create a life that they want to live.
Thank you, Hunter and Stefany, for sharing that. And it's I second all you guys said, and also the importance of listening to those who are the most affected in this type of situation, and how traumatic it is to share those stories over and over again, and have to live that at that moment when you're sharing, and the importance of listening with intention, and at the same time reflect and see, what we can do, to be part of this movement to end human trafficking, to end the exploitation that exists, and understand that those that are vulnerable to fall in this type of situation are the ones that are dealing with poverty, sexism, the LGBTQ community. But this happened to everyone. Sometimes we think about the most vulnerable, but those stories out there that we see in the movies sometimes are not the real one. So by listening to those who are experiencing or went through situations like that is probably the best way, so we don't come with this, like the white survivor, the white like the white person that's coming to help, and to come with solutions, when sometimes we just causing more damage or more harm, uh, when we try to help, and without having that understanding of it. So in order to move on to the next question, for Stefany, is what do you think our future communities will look when trafficking and exploitation aren't an issue anymore? How you see that moment, that's what we work for, because that's our goal, to see an end on it, an end of this harm in our community. So how you see that? Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. That would be really, in an ideal world, but I think it would, for me, it would be that anyone, not man, woman, anybody that identifies from the LGBTQ community, or not being able to feel like they're a target, and whatever it is that they're going through, for someone else to be using like those vulnerabilities like against them, and take advantage of. So I think it's that feeling of, you would be able to ask someone for help, being able to ask for help, and not be victim blamed as well, and offering more opportunities for individuals and families that are in vulnerable situations, rather than others using it as a form of manipulation or isolate them, and exploitation. So I think for me, it would be a space in a world where everyone should feel like they're not taken advantage of, and feel safe. Being who they are, and that everybody could go through difficult times, but that it shouldn't be used like against them in a way. And also I guess everybody being able to express how they feel, and again being able to provide like opportunities and spaces to be able to heal or be able to get the support that one needs.
That's a really beautiful answer, and I think as I was listening to your answer, I was also thinking, like, why do we ask this question? Like, when are we going to get to the tips and tools? And I think the interesting thing about this is if we can't actually imagine what that future community looks like, then how do we figure out what those steps are to get there, right? It's almost like we think about this future, we can envision, we can feel and taste and smell and hear what it looks like. And then from that point, I think that's kind of where we're coming from, is we can sort of work backwards and be like, now, how did we get to this place where everyone feels like they can ask for help and that they can actually receive that help, right? Like, how do we like make this change happen in our day to day? And that kind of leads us right into the next question of what are some practical steps or actions that people can take, whether they're big or small. Obviously that's up to everyone's perspective, but what are some of these steps that we can take right now to start working towards that beautiful vision, that you just shared with us?
If it's okay, I'm gonna kind of give a little bit like a story or kind of something growing up, what I experienced, and I think it's one of the important steps. So like I mentioned earlier today, growing up, I think I always heard um, from people around me growing up saying that it was a Spanish saying that said like the man goes as far as the woman lets him. Felix, perhaps maybe you've kind of heard it. I've shared it in the past, and I think it was always just kind of like giving the female or like the responsibility of whatever happened between them, and also just kind of not allowing for the male man to be able to like set those boundaries, to be able to, again, I'm going back to a little bit to like the consent part or be accountable, and this goes for everyone, right? Like not just making just one being responsible rather than both of them. And so growing up, I just saw a lot of how there was a lot of expectations from me because I was identified as girl, I'm a girl, and they just like, no, boys cannot play with dolls, or boys cannot shouldn't cry. A lot of like, don't cry because only girls cry, right? So again, oppressing kind of like their feelings, or like not allowing them to express their emotions because, oh, you're a girl if you cry, or boys don't cry. So I think and this kind of leads to the answer to your question of, I think it's giving them the space to be able to process and feel those emotions. I think I bottled up a lot of emotions, and now while doing this work, I have been able to really feel like, how did that feel for you, and what can I do so the next generation and the youth that I work with and youth that I like may come across in my personal life, how can I be of support and for them to be able to open up when experiencing a situation where they might feel, and that also that it's not always the man has to be the abusive persons towards like the female, but that it can be vice versa, and it can be towards everyone, and that anyone can be going through this. I forgot one of like my answers, but yeah, I think that's kind of what I have right now. I'll come back if I remember.
Yeah, I was gonna ask our regulars here if you had thoughts about Stefany's response, or if you have other ideas that come to mind for you.
Absolutely. I second again what Stefany mentioned, but at the same time, it's to question ourselves if have you heard this type of conversation before? Because if you haven't heard this before, I need to bring you this, that you're privileged if you have never had to worry about have this type of conversation. Because in my case as a man, I never had to think about that. I think because I was a man, and even when I used to live in Dominican Republic, I was exposed to that same example that Stefany brought. The of when you're 15, you're supposed to go and have sex, or pay for sex in order to be considered a man. And in my situation, for me, it was shocking when I hear my dad say, no, I'm not gonna take my son there, because at that age, your hormones are going, you don't know what's going on. You have this idea that sex workers, they do that because they want to. You don't have that idea that a lot of most of them, they're being forced to do that, or they do it because they need it, because it's a way to bring money to the table, in order to feed their kids. So once you learn that, it changed your mind. I mean, for me, as a father of two daughters, having two sisters, for one side, is incredible the knowledge that you get from having this conversation, but at the same time, it make you more aware of what's going on out there. What's going on every time I drop my daughter in a bar, or my my daughters with their friends to a place. It make me more aware of the dangers that are out there, and what I can do, what kind of steps I can bring to my family, to my circles first, and also to the spaces where I facilitate conversation about healthy masculinity, to create that awareness, to start breaking those ideas that we get from the movies, and bring with the realistic, the reality of what those individuals are experiencing, based in their stories, based in the information that we get out there. So I think bringing this conversation is probably the best step, to talk about it, to be aware, specifically because we know it's a problem in our society, and also to donate, also to support organizations doing this type of work, because it is needed, and it's our opportunity to take action, to do those first steps, to be sure that future generations don't need to experience human trafficking or being exploited, because there's a lot of intersections out there, and this conversation could take forever if we start going to every single one of those intersections. But starting this conversation, as like as it happened in a lot of homes, in their kitchens, just to bring it up and learn from each other, because there's a lot of spaces where we can bring this topic, and we can start a movement, and create action. So yeah.
You reminded me of my second part of my answer, Felix. You mentioned like the movies, right? Like that's only males that recruit young girls or females, and that the reality is that females can be recruiters too, and can recruit young men and young boys and young women. And again, having these conversations and creating that it's happening, and that it doesn't need to be a stranger. I think a lot of times we think, no, it's like in the movies, right? Like it can be anyone. Yes, you might. Communities with like more vulnerable situations might be more at higher risk, but I mean, it can be anyone who is a student that can have like perfect grades and have a family, and it just doesn't take. But again, creating, I do when I work with schools and the youth that I work with, and just talk about what are some of like the risk, and creating those safety plans, like have a contact person for emergency, and nowadays technology, how that's being used, and with the sharing the location as well. Um, it's just yeah, so very easy to become a target. But again, um, to have these conversations and spreading that awareness as well. And um, what I also do and have seen a lot is for some of the youth that are newcomers, dating older, like that age gap, and talking about a bit of the laws and their rights, because a lot of people that do come from other countries, not aware with the laws or afraid to ask for help. And just, I think that's also very important that there are resources regarding the status, and maybe the experience back in their countries with law enforcement. And so that was the addition to my question, to my answer.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that's already been mentioned was, some things that I was thinking about. It reminded me, I think, Felix, when you shared about like as a father and, a brother, and we think about the people who are in our lives, who we care about and we support. And I think that men and masculine people, that's one of the big things that comes to mind for me is like we can be um, safe people. Like we can work to learn, right? We got to learn and do our work, unlearn some of the, unhealthy ways that society has taught us how to be as men, and like really work to become these safe people that women and femme folks and queer folks and kids, like when they see us, they know that we're safe. And, they can know that from, how we live our lives, how we're showing up in communities, and the work that we do. It reminds me of when I first started working at Men as Peacemakers like 7-ish years ago. And within that first year of like people realizing that that's where I was working, and knowing what Men as Peacemakers does, working to prevent violence. I can't even tell you the number of people, mainly women and femme identified people in my life, who came to me, after they knew that that's where I was working, and many of them shared stories of violence and sexual assault that they had experienced. And I remember thinking, like, how did I not know, that this was happening to all the people in my lives, that, so many of these women and femme folks had experienced, moments, multiple instances of violence in their life. And I think just, the fact that they knew that I was working at this place where, I was doing my work, as a man, as a masculine person in the community, to really become that safe person. And then they felt safe to come and share, or, share their stories, or again, like ask for help. Like you just don't, um, I think about the survivors that I've, been really grateful that they've shared their stories with me, and with this whole movement, right? There's so many survivors who are leading this movement of work, which is how it should be. And I think, there's so much judgment that society places on people, especially if they're experiencing violence, as well as, say, poverty or racism or other forms of discrimination. And we just don't make it easy for those folks to find help and to find support. And so, I'm just thinking about that. Like, how can we as men and mask folks like show that we are safe, or even coming to like the awareness of like maybe we aren't fully safe people yet. Maybe we still have work to do when it comes to being in supportive and safe relationships with the women and femme folks in our lives. Just some of my thoughts. I'm curious, Hunter, if you have anything coming to mind as well.
One thing that's resonating for me is just what you finished up saying, Sean, is like, are we seen as men or masculine folks as like a safe person? And I think that speaks to the work we as individuals have or maybe have not done, but regardless need to continue doing, because I think we have to be accountable for our actions, because we as individuals can't all of a sudden see ourselves as a safe person and expect everyone else is going to, see the potential work that we have done. So I do think there is that accountability and responsibility as individuals that we have to be in community and really have to do that work to be able to, authentically engage with the people that we care about, to demonstrate that we are safe individuals to connect with individuals as well. And one thing, and hopefully this isn't too off topic, but for some reason, what's coming to mind for me again is just going back to this topic of consent, and like asking the question is like, who typically gets or asks for consent? And I think the immediate answer is a very like heteronormative answer. That's the man or the masculine person. And so it kind of strips away that consent isn't for men or masculine folks. It's just, I guess you could see it as a barrier to get to, another step in that, sexual activity or circumstance, right? And so I think if we kind of flip the script and are talking about that, men and masculine folks need to understand like what they want, what they're comfortable, how can they communicate their thoughts and feelings. I do think that is really going to create stepping stones and ripple effects to create, more empathy, more open avenues of communication, more opportunity to dig into authenticity and some community connections as well. So maybe that's totally off topic from this conversation, but it's just kind of what's coming up for me right now.
I feel like that
Hunter, you mentioned.
resonates.
Oh, sorry. Can I go? Oh, okay. You brought up something that about like the space, if like we're ready, like as men, to provide services or the space. I think it's really important to, as an organization, look at the diversity of like the staff as well and the services we're providing, because I have worked with a few, I think I've been one of the advocates that have worked with a few male identifying survivors. And what I've seen is, I'm not sure if it's because I'm a girl, and maybe they would feel more comfortable having this conversation with a male, and they seem to disclose, and then it's like going back to no, I don't want to proceed. They're not going to believe me. So I do see this a lot within my community, and again, I think we can be ready, and I think it's this kind of like, let's give it a try and see what works. What do we need to change? How can we be there for the community? I don't know, this was just kind of like a thought of kind of like what we can continue working as well.
Yeah, I love that. I was thinking about, Hunter, what you shared, and then Estefany. It's like thinking about who do we go to as men and masculine folks in community, like when we've experienced harm, or when we're looking to grow and to build and to become better versions, safer versions of ourselves. And I was thinking, in my experience personally, I feel like a lot of my learning and growth is because of the women and femme folks in my life. Like they were the ones who came to me and said, "Hey, Sean, I see you doing this thing, and I don't think that's what you want to be doing," and they would hold me accountable, and then I felt comfortable to talk with them. And and maybe it's because I'm a person of trans experience, I'm a trans guy, maybe I feel more comfortable speaking with women and femme folks because that was my experience growing up. Um, and I also think there's this thing where men and masculine people, like if we admit to each other that we've experienced harm or that we're struggling or that we're lonely or anything, I feel like there's this wall that I've experienced at least where we don't want to be seen as weak. We don't want to be seen as people who are failing or who aren't succeeding in life. I feel like there's so much pressure on men and masculine people to just sort of have things figured out or to not need like as much emotional support. And I just really don't think that's the case. Like, I think we all need tons of support emotionally. And I think that as we as men and masculine people in community can learn to like rely on each other, I feel like that like helps us grow, right? And it also takes off some of the burden that I think we, myself included, just sort of automatically place on women to sort of help us do that learning. Women are the ones who have led this movement, and I think it's easy, and when I think about it, to just say, "Oh, I'm gonna go talk to Sarah. I'm gonna go talk to Kia." These, women friends versus like, actually, man, I should reach out to Felix and let him know what I'm struggling with. Like, I should reach out to some of my guy friends and really practice that reaching out. I think even just like sending a message that says, "Hey, I'm struggling," like that's not easy to do. And I think the more that we are able to practice that, just reaching out and saying, "Hey, Hunter, like, how you doing? I'm not doing great. Can we chat?" Or, whatever it is. It's like it feels like that's a practice to start doing that with our men in mask friends or relatives, and colleagues within the workplace, wherever it is. So that feels like a tool that I have personally been trying to sort of work on in the last couple years, and it's getting easier in some ways, and in other ways, I feel like it's always going to be hard because we just grow up in a culture that does not value our emotions, does not value like the wholeness of who we are as human beings. And I think when we think about that future community, that's what we want, right? We want all of us to be able to live, all of us, like, and not have to, sort of silo or cut off parts of ourselves to be in community, if that makes any sense.
Yes, Sean. And something that comes to my mind also, sorry, I have dogs and they're probably going to start barking now. It's a truck outside. But it's when it's time to talk to our kids about these type of topics that are, they're difficult specifically, but also being respectful of our sons and daughters or non-binary uh, folks uh, that don't know what to talk about, have these type of conversations, being respectful of their space, but at the same time keeping an eye in all these social medias that are out there that can open a space for folks to be trafficked, to be exploited. These group chats, and the more I think about this, the more I realize how we are normalized sometimes providing gifts through social media. I think I had a conversation just recently where uh, someone that we start sharing all these avenues that are open out there that sometimes as a parent, and in my case, I never did pay attention. And now when I think about it, they're very scary just because there are folks out there that are maybe pretending to be kids and they're just connecting to our kids and having conversations, trying to find out where they live, trying to find out a little bit more, and it shows us how vulnerable we are, and sometimes just because we don't talk about this is why we don't realize that we need to try to keep an eye in our kids and have the conversations with them to be aware, and so they can advocate for themselves, and also at the same time have the tools to talk to their friends about that, specifically when they're young. So because I want to be respectful of time, uh, uh, I will like to go with another question, and that I would like to end this conversation like this. So, uh, for example, we in order to end this conversation, this is a question that I want. Sorry, I'm just turning into a mess right now. What do you feel hopeful about for the future, or for future generations, when we have this type of conversation? So, what do you feel hopeful? I know this is a difficult topic. It's a topic that could bring a lot of trauma. It's not easy, but what do you feel hopeful? And this question, we can probably start with Stefany. Uh, so yeah, so I'll repeat it again. What do you feel hopeful about for future generations about this type of conversation, and what we're looking forward to see?
What do I feel hopeful? I might need a minute to think, but I think again, just kind of similar to the previous question, just where anyone should feel comfortable within themselves and being able to ask for the help and just express emotions and not be frowned upon if it's like a male that is asking for help, or it feels the need that they need to talk to someone and cry, and without being like judgmental, and hopeful to continue again for these generations that they feel comfortable talking about it, because I think for me certain things were just kind of, no, we don't talk about that, right? Like it happened, but like we don't talk about it. And it's like, no, we should be talking about it. Like we need to be having these uncomfortable conversations, because this is the only way we're going to be able to actually continue growing and learning. But so I think again, like just might be a little bit of what I hope, feeling hopeful for. And
Just to kind of piggyback off what you were saying, Stefany, I don't know if anyone has seen the TV show Ted Lasso, but I've been watching that a lot because I'm actually doing a presentation on masculinity in a couple months and trying to get some recent popular culture examples. But Ted Lasso says a quote that's something along the lines of, if you're comfortable riding a horse, you're probably doing it wrong. And I think that really resonates with me, because if we just stay comfortable at all times and never experience uncomfortability, we're likely not learning. We're not being introduced to new experiences and circumstances. And I think we really have to start leaning more so into being uncomfortable, because again, I really think that's where learning happens, where we can connect. Like Sean was just saying, like it can be really uncomfortable for me to like feeling like I'm struggling, but being hesitant to reach out to Sean or Felix or, somebody else in my life. Right. And it can be really scary if you're a parent and have a child and they're asking questions about, sex or different things on social media. And an initial feeling could be, and sometimes a valid response could be, just shutting that conversation down because it feels uncomfortable. You might not have all the information, but how can we be more curious and lean into that uncomfortability? Because I think that also generates more authenticity, right? Because no one's going to be perfect. No one's going to have all the answers. So how can we problem solve this situation together? How can we learn from one another in this space? And so I think this idea of what you were talking about, Estefany, with, knowing that we're going to start having a lots of uncomfortable conversations, and we should, leaning into that uncomfortability as well.
And to just jump in on that, I think there's a difference too between feeling uncomfortable and feeling unsafe. And I think that is sort of an excuse that a lot of people will use, like, I don't feel safe, or like this, if the conversation gets uncomfortable, we shy away, right? The sort of Minnesota nice vibe where it's like, we don't want to hurt anyone's feelings or this or that. And it's like, actually, I totally agree with what y'all are saying. Like, it's in those uncomfortable moments where growth happens. Um, and so that was just one piece that I was thinking about, is like, but are you really unsafe, or is it, oh man, this conversation is, hitting a nerve in me, and what is that nerve, and why is it getting to me, right? Like, I like what you said, Hunter, about being curious rather than being judgmental. Like, how can we really dig a little deeper into how we're feeling? Because I think, learning how it shows up in our bodies, like when we're feeling that stress or discomfort, that's really helpful. Because if I'm having a conversation with you, Felix, about whatever it is, and I can feel my heart is pumping or my chest feels tight, these sort of just regular bodily reactions that we have when we feel uncomfortable or stressed or overwhelmed, I get real sweaty. It's a mess. But it's like, then I can notice, oh, wait, what's happening? Like, there's something going on. My body's trying to tell me something. I need to just be more curious about that so that I can learn, grow, and continue to become like this, safer, masculine person in the community.
Yes, yeah, and obviously looking for those tools out there. I'm very grateful to have that conversation a couple of weeks ago with Noelle, listening to those way that how system works, the system, what is systematic oppression, and start putting the dots together of how human trafficking and commercial sexual exploitation happen in my community. And we hope that every one of you guys also start connecting those dots, start those conversations, start realizing what we need to do, in order to be part of this huge group of people that are battling and try to end commercial sexual exploitation and human trafficking. Something that is real, something that affects us all, no matter where you're from, your social class, etc. And to start breaking those stereotypes, and being sure that men also are part of this movement, even when we know a lot of men benefit from patriarchy, they're not willing to change. But there's more good men than bad men out there. So let's remember that we all have women's and people in our lives that could fall in this, and we all have a role to play. We all have these gifts that we can put together in order to be part of the movement. This doesn't need to be done alone. As a community, we're good enough to work together. I think we have tools out there. We need to also lift the voices of those most affected, and also those that have been working in this field for years and years, because there's a lot of knowledge out there. Let's put our privilege aside and let's work together for our communities, for the world that we live. Because, like the question that we ask, Stefany, how you see a world without, when we don't need to worry about people being exploited, where everybody could be the best version of themselves. And when you think about that, it's like the perfect world. It's a world where you have resources, where you can feel supported, so you don't need to worry about all those things that you guys have been mentioning about, sometimes having those difficult conversations, and to who, because we all have our experiences, and sometimes talking about them, they're hard, because we're opening ourselves, we're putting them in positions where we know there are people out there that would like to take advantage of you when they know that there's certain things that break you. There's certain things that make you feel small, and it shouldn't be that way. We all have the capacity to make a difference in our communities and our circles, and it's when we have these conversations with Noelle and now with Stefany, someone that's doing that work, direct work with the communities, when we realize that there are a bunch of amazing people out there that we can learn of, and we can look for help and ask them if there's any way we can support them. So I'm very grateful of these conversations, and I thank Noelle that probably will be listening to this conversation, and also Stefany for the amazing work that you guys do. And thank you for inspiring us to become better men and masculine folks, and to realize that we have a role to play, and together we gonna accomplish that.
Thank you. And thank you for giving me the space for having these conversations. And again, I think I have also learned a lot from you, Felix, working together, and from all these men I have come across throughout work and personal life. And just, again, thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm feeling so grateful for the gift of this conversation, and Estefany, for you sharing your time and energy and knowledge and experiences with us. Like Felix said, like we really need to, as men and masculine folks, follow the lead of folks doing this work, who are hearing, the direct stories from survivors and victims, and we can always continue to do better and grow and connect deeper together, I think, as a community, to really make this change happen. It is possible. We believe that, and we hold on to that hope that we can create communities that are free from violence like this. So we want to thank everybody for joining us today at the kitchen table, for joining our conversation. And again, thank you so much to Estefany for joining us and being a special guest star. It has been really a gift to get to know you a little bit better, and to hear about your work and how you see the work moving and changing as we continue on towards that goal of that future for our descendants and future kids and everybody, right? Where we can all feel safe and whole and get the support that we need. So, as we wrap up here, just as a reminder, we are holding these kitchen table conversations twice a month, and typically held on Thursdays at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. This one we set up a separate recording, so you'll see this one a little bit later. But again, you can join us for our next conversation at the kitchen table, where we'll be welcoming Sean Elmquist, who's been in some conversations already with us, but Sean works at Men as Peacemakers and is the campus prevention coordinator. And so we're going to be having a conversation about mutual sexual respect, and it'll be right around Valentine's Day. So we think we've timed this well. So we hope that you and everyone around you will join us for that conversation.
So please don't forget to follow us on social media and stay connected with the Men and Masculine Folks Network. You can like and follow our Facebook page. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can also listen to our conversations now in podcast form. Find them now on Spotify and Podbean. So please like us, follow us there. And if you're watching this conversation as part of our virtual training for the Don't Buy It project, please see the description below for the instruction about downloading the corresponding discussions and activity guides. So thank you.
And as always, we encourage you to have a conversation like this with the people in your lives, around the kitchen table, at your workplace, wherever it is. Together, we are building interconnected communities that are free from violence, where everyone can thrive. So thank you again for joining us here at the kitchen table conversation.